Welcome, Denise, to the Empathy Edge podcast. I'm so excited to have you on. This has been a little while in the making, but I'm so excited to talk about purpose and your work with TBWA and your work with clients and your work on helping companies create brands that mean something. So welcome.
Thank you, Maria. I've been excited and waiting for the day. I think we have so many points of intersection. It's become incredible. So finally, we get to have this conversation.
I love it. I love it. So let's start off real quickly. You are Chief Purpose Officer for Omnicom's Purpose Collective and TBWA.
Yes.
For folks that are fuzzy on what that actually means and what you actually do, what's the role of a Chief Purpose Officer? Because not every organization is lucky enough to have one.
No, the role was actually made for me almost 3 years ago now. And it's interesting because I still have people in our organization. They're like, what do you actually do? And what I actually do is I go in mostly with the C-suite and board of directors, and I help them create their business case for purpose. So a lot of folks that are of a certain demographic, they didn't come up the ranks in business with purpose. So there are a lot of preconceived notions of what it is. You know, it's soft and fuzzy. It's getting hit with the pretty stick. It's all these things. But we all know in 2022, post the events of 2020, it's now become a really powerful operating system that goes across the top of the organization. It's a great uniter. It's got this juicy business case that helps attract top talent. It helps reduce employee turnover. It helps protect against risk. So I always like to think of purpose as two halves to a whole. You have risk on one side and growth and innovation on the other. So we really try and tap into those 2 or 3 spheres of influence and develop the best business case we can specifically for the organization. So that's where I spend my days.
Oh my gosh, I love it. Now, do you do this for clients as well, or is this just internal?
No, I mostly work on the client side, and I get lucky sometimes and get to do this internally for our own organization.
Nice.
But this is done a lot through our various clients. So it's wonderful because I get to touch so many different industries and sectors. And what you get to see time and time again is that they're more alike than they are different.
And what are some of the misconceptions about purpose? Because I imagine you probably get a lot of deer in the headlights stares when you start talking about purpose and people going, well, I don't know. Is that just like an inspirational vision statement? Is that, how do you go about helping them understand what purpose actually is? Tell us.
I think by deconstructing it, really looking at where its source of power lies, it's a great uniter. It's a great activator. McKinsey did a fantastic piece of research looking at what they refer to as the purpose gap. And what they identified is over 80% of vice presidents and above firmly believe they get their purpose at work. Well, unfortunately, 80% and above of mid-level managers and frontline workers firmly believe they do not get their purpose at work. So it really sort of unearthed why a lot of people don't feel like they're getting that. It's because it's not getting out to the furthest ends of the organization. So we spend a lot of time and energy figuring out how do we activate and meet employees where they are. Then we broaden that sphere. How do we meet stakeholders where they are? How do we meet investors where they are? How do we meet customers where they are? And really start to use this purpose as a unifying lens by which all these organizations can start making really key critical decisions to the business. And it's fascinating what starts to happen when you hold that lens up, because all of a sudden, a lot of organizations have this guts instinct that they have to respond to everything. No, you don't. You don't have to respond to everything. And as a matter of fact, if it's not part of your core, not part of your purpose, I would suggest potentially not, and maybe holding back and really focusing your time, energy, and effort where you show up, how you show up, when you show up through your purpose. And it starts to anchor things.
And do you think the language actually matters? Because, people throw around things like, for me, for example, with my brand strategy and brand story clients, we talk about vision and mission. And really vision is the what's the future state that we're here for. What I actually try to define it as, what's the future state that could potentially put us out of business someday? Right. That if it was achieved, you no longer need our company. Right. And that's where that gets a little scary. But does it matter what it's called in the organization? If it's called vision or mission or purpose, I'd love to know if that nomenclature makes a difference.
I think we're having a lexicon nightmare right now, and people are using words interchangeably that aren't interchangeable. So one of the things I always do is ask, if they use a word, what does that mean to you? So I'll hear things like ESG and purpose be swapped out. Sustainability gets swapped out. All of these words start, mission and purpose are swapped out. And I don't think that anyone's necessarily absolutely right or absolutely wrong, because we don't have these universal definitions. But I do think it's very important that you're speaking the same language. So clearly delineating what you mean when you say those words, especially with any client. And as a client is speaking to their key stakeholders, everyone has to understand what they mean when they're using those words. So I think it is important, because the way I see purpose is the strategic operating system that goes across the arc. It's the umbrella concept. And things like ESG and sustainability and DEI, they hang to that purpose.
Right.
So all of a sudden, we're starting to create these layers, and how they connect together matters.
Exactly. And when we talk about brand architecture, that's where I try to get them to, that's actually not a mission statement. That's a vision statement. A mission statement is more about the actions that you take every day in support of the vision. So I think you're right. It's absolutely about, can everyone internally at least come to an agreement about how we're using these words and what they mean to us? And maybe you have another word for it. Maybe it's not purpose. Maybe it's our philosophy or our credo or whatever it's called. But it's the important thing you're saying is they need to have it.
They need to have it. They need to understand what it is and how it applies to them specifically. I have clients that are allergic to the word purpose. You say the word, they're immediately going to check out on you, because they've had some negative experience and they can't get past it. So we use other words. We just figure out how to define what we're talking about, and that's the word we'll use. But if you look at the epicenter of purpose, this is oversimplified, but it really gets to the why question. Why does the company exist? Sometimes it has to do with the founder's story. There's usually a really deep-rooted explanation as to why the world would miss that organization if they were no longer to exist. So the why is usually what we start as the epicenter, and start moving out those concentric rings to build that in a meaningful way.
Well, I love this conversation because I have a lot of clients in tech and a lot of startup clients where the company started by a technologist who just had a really cool idea for how to make something work better. And they struggle with this whole mission vision thing, because they're like, but I don't get it. It's just, there was this problem and we created this piece of technology to solve it. We don't think there's any other story to it than that.
Oh, there's always more story to it.
Exactly. So tell us about that.
It's part of, if you think about an onion and peeling back those layers, if you get a client like that genuinely believes we just did this because it was the right thing to do.
And we can make money doing it.
That's it. Yeah. We can make money doing that. Well, if you would like to have employees in the next 10 years, they care a whole lot. This next generation, we have 5 generations in the workforce right now.
Yes.
And the upcoming generations care a lot. Salary isn't number 1. It's not even 2 or 3. It's down at like 5. So that's usually a compelling reason. Think about having employees and their well-being and their turnover and their tenure with your organization. So we've got all those interesting facts. And then we look at the sustainability of an organization. If we want a sustainable organization, and I don't mean it being, kind to the environment, but if we want it to have longevity and we want it to be here, it's one of the cornerstones. So another facet, it's good for the company. This is good business. And we've got a lot of rich data from our friends in academia. And I sit on both sides of the hall. So I've got a lot of academic friends that have rigorous and robust research. And then we've got our consultants that have done some phenomenal things. And we now have a trend line that's pretty hard to debate. It's, if someone now asks me to debate the business case, I'm like, uh-oh. I will. I'm happy to. That's the academic in me. I'll gladly play both sides and take your argument and try and, kind of 360 find my way all the way around. But it's so rich. It's so detailed. It's so deep now from every one of our key stakeholders.
Right.
It's kind of hard to say it frivolous or it's a
Right.
loss center or some of these things I hear all the time.
Well, and I think that's part of the job of those of us that are brand shepherds or communicators, is to help give them the words, because I find it's not, once I pull the story out of them, then I can articulate a vision and a mission and a
Right.
purpose, and it resonates with them. But they were not able to find those words themselves.
Right.
And it's just, I am convinced of the power of being able to articulate an idea, because that's what people can get behind. That's what they can rally behind.
Stories are the great thing throughout the ages that have united people and connected them. And good storytelling is where this lives on in perpetuity.
Absolutely.
So I think it's super important.
Well, and not to mention, you were talking about employees, which a lot of the research for the Empathy Edge was around that, about millennials who are now in their 40s, and Gen Z coming behind them, how they're not putting up with the same crap we put up with when we were coming up, right? And I have always said this for folks that have been listening for a while. They've heard me say this ad nauseum. I'm like, good on them, because it makes it better for all of us, that they're just asking for the things we were too scared or didn't think we had the right ask for. And so not only that, but the idea of what consumers are demanding, whether it's B2B or B2C.
It makes no difference.
Their purchase decisions say something about them.
They do.
And they want to become part of communities that are aligned with their values, whatever those values are. So if you have that purpose, it stands to reason that you're putting up the flag of this is who we are. If you're, I always say, if you're down with this, come work with us, come partner with us, come buy from us.
Right. And I would put investors on that list now.
Yes.
We are seeing investors vote with their dollars.
Mm-hmm.
And we've never seen an explosion of ESG activity, purpose-driven activity like we have in the markets. And it's been really fascinating. And it's happened both ways, because we've seen investors that are drawn towards companies with this values alignment, but we've also seen activist investors in the house who are frustrated or upset by the lack of alignment. And they can do a lot in a short amount of time. So we've seen both scenarios where it's investors saying, our values are not aligned and we're going to do something about it.
Now that's interesting. That kind of takes me off on a little bit of a tangent, because I've been reading a lot about how some ESG initiatives are getting sidelined because of the state of the economy and the state of the markets. Are you seeing that? Were you seeing sort of a robust commitment to purpose? Do you see that waning at all in the face of economic pressure?
I don't, in the sense that the organizations that are already using purpose as a source of growth and innovation, they've already seen the magic. It's good business. It's helping the business become more sustainable in its growth, in its trajectory, and all of those wonderful, beautiful little bits and pieces of the business case. For the companies who haven't, and they're maybe very early on their journey, of course, they're starting to ask the question, can we invest in this and still be good to our organization? And I think that's a fine question to ask.
Mm-hmm. So can you give us some examples of folks that are doing this right?
It's interesting, because no matter who I say, there's no perfect organization.
Right.
There's no perfect person.
Right.
So if I
doing it 80% right, 70% right.
Unilever, I think, is a great example, because when I walk into a boardroom with the C-suite or the board of directors, they always want to get to that bottom line case. And it's very, very difficult to compare apples to apples. That's something that not a lot of organizations can do. Unilever does it beautifully. They've actually bifurcated their products into different portfolios that are based on the sustainable portfolio and the non-sustainable portfolio. And what we can see is that sustainable portfolio is dramatically outperforming the regular portfolio every time, year over year. So for the people who want to get right to that bottom line, which I think is a mistake, I think there are a lot of other wonderful details that ladder up to the bottom line, but they're also very important to be measured. But I think Unilever can definitely hold its torch as the standout when we're talking about that metric.
Awesome. Awesome. And what caused that initiative within Unilever? Was it consumer pressure? Was it just gauging the winds of change? Was it that they were trying to create more sustainability, to be more environmentally conscious so they wouldn't, be made obsolete? Like what Do you
I
know
think
what
it
were
was
the
a
factors?
combination. I was not in the room, but I do have friends that were. It
Hmm.
was a transition in a CEO. It was trying to define what the new era was going to be about. There was something about that that really spoke to them in the early days. And that was their purpose statement for a really long time was, really leaning into making every consumer sustainable. And I think it's grown from there. And now they're doing these wonderful things where they're looking into supply chain and they're encouraging more diversity, not only in their employee groups, but in their supplier groups. And they've definitely kind of left the entry level long, long ago. And they're able to really fine tune and make these programs so much more robust. And I really commend them for that because it's kind of this great golden star to hold out for everyone to say, oh, the financial case is very much there. This
Yes.
is really causing, a ripple effect that ladders up to fantastic business and growth. But we're also having profound effect on the planet and people.
Right.
So it's
Right.
that win-win-win.
I know. I don't see how there's a loss there for anyone. And that's why, they're one of the case studies in my book, The Empathy Edge, because of the ability to do it at scale.
Absolutely.
Because I think a lot of times we tend to think, oh, this purpose driven stuff, this empathy stuff, it's for smaller companies. And there is a way to scale it that I have examples in my book. I'm sure you've worked with larger organizations that are global in
Yes.
nature. Does it even matter? Because it's just a collection of people, no matter what, whether
No
it's
matter what,
100 or 100,000.
that's the thing. I will tell you, the companies that start with purpose at the epicenter from the beginning have an advantage just
Mm,
because it's built into their DNA. So we have our B Corps, we have some organizations. That's what their intention was all along. So it's a bit easier because their
right.
hiring practices, most of their goals that they're setting and the KPIs that they're tracking all support that notion from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
But it does not mean that a massive multinational can't have the same effect. It's a bit harder. It's a
Mm-hmm.
bit slower. It's all the things you would think because of the size. But
Right.
you look at a company like P&G, who is also doing some fantastic things. I just had the good fortune of spending some time with their chief sustainability officer, and she blew me away. She had some of the most fantastic stories of how she got senior leadership, particularly the CEOs, and they had quite a bit of turnover in a short amount of time. How
Mm-hmm.
she got them to own it and really make it theirs. And I was just
I
putty in her
love
hands.
that.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I bet. Well, and that actually brings me to another question. What are the ingredients required if a company is going to say, yeah, we want to commit to purpose. We've got to actually define what our purpose is.
Yes.
Is it a combination of leadership driving the conversation, but then also getting input from all levels in the organization? Does there have to sort of be one champion that is, again, what's the expression? Too many cooks in the kitchen.
Yeah.
When you actually have to get to a point where we need to decide what
Yes.
our purpose statement credo is going to be, does it have to be clear from the onset about, this is where we're gathering all the input, but then these are the people that are going to make the final decision?
You should
I'm interested in
try.
the tactics of it.
Yeah, you should try and endeavor for that. What it usually ends up being is you have to have the CEO's buy-in. If you do not have CEO buy-in, it's destined to
It's a
fail at
lost
some point.
cause.
It
Yeah.
is, and it's tedious and difficult. And for your passion players that have shown up that this really means something to them, it's just a source of incredible frustration.
Mm,
But I will add to that, getting your CEO's personal purpose to mesh with the corporation's purpose, that's where the magic happens. When
nice.
they start to see how that works and how that intersects, 1 + 1 starts to equal 4, 5, or 6. It's really an exponential growth factor. So I think you have to have the CEO, but I wouldn't necessarily have the CEO own it because the CEO has a lot of other tasks during the day.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you need the CEO to champion it, but you need a person to own it, and then you need a committee to support it. But
Mhm.
I believe strongly, yes, you've got to have the participation, you've got to have the interaction and the collaboration, and I'll use the word co-creation with your employees at every level. If it isn't speaking to them and they can't see themselves in the purpose, it's a lost cause.
Mm. So true. So true. So, how you got on my radar is that I read an amazing article that you were interviewed for, which was called 5 Mistakes Boards Make When Thinking About Purpose. And as you said, it could have been 5 mistakes leaders make when thinking about purpose. So can you talk to us a little bit about what those pitfalls are? Maybe just a few highlighted ones. I'll put a link to this article in the show notes for my listeners. So don't you worry, you'll get all 5, but maybe are there some highlights in there, Denise, that we can dig into, and maybe what's the antidote for some of those?
One of them is what we were just talking about. And I had the good fortune of writing this article with Afdel Aziz, and he's just fantastic. He's also a fellow purpose practitioner. So it was us really dreaming about what we wished we had when we were sitting in the boardroom, especially with people who have not come up with purpose as something that was a lever in an organization that had power and a lot of potential behind it, for
Right.
this, notion of growth, for this notion of how to innovate, and for reputational risk. And again, we're kind of coming back to that. But the last one, I will tell you, I got a lot of chatter online about, and that was not having a purpose committee and assuming everyone is responsible.
Right.
Dollar
Right.
for every
Just
time.
anarchy.
I sit on a lot of boards.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of we will leave out the first part, but the splaining of, oh, everyone's responsible for that. I'm like, great, who owns it?
Right.
Who's responsible for the KPIs and measuring this and making sure it's enacted? Then you get the kind of face.
Right.
I have Great Danes, and they're infamous for making the kind of face,
Cocking their head to the side.
Right?
Yeah.
That's it. And I'm like, oh, then we have a problem, because even though, yes, I agree, everybody should own this, if someone doesn't own it, it's never going to be developed into something that's meaningful, rich, and robust. And if we're not doing it at the board or the C-suite level, the rest of the organization is not going to perceive that it's important.
Yeah.
So that, to me, is something that it's that notion of modeling. You're asking your organization to adopt it. Your board had better adopt it, and your C-suite leaders have to adopt it. So I think the board sometimes exempts themselves. And that's for the executive team, that's for the employees, that's for whatever. The truth is, no, you should be mirroring a great culture. And if the culture is purpose driven, you had better be purpose driven on the board. And there are just some key things that at the end of the day, if you're missing them, board's not representing the community. That was another one that that was
one that really resonated with me. Tell us what you mean by that. When the board doesn't represent the community, that's a big mistake.
We've got a lot of DEI issues right now that people are contending with and trying to rectify, a lot of wrongs that have been out there. One of the fastest ways to identify whether or not that board is taking things seriously is to look at its composition. Does it look like the community it's representing, or does it look like a lot of unfortunate other boards where you see the same gender, the same age demographic? And if that's the case, you should probably reconsider, because you're not representing your stakeholders if that's the case. So I think it's really important to look long and hard, and not just against one or two of these slices and demographic, but at multiple slices. Age is one of them. I think it's really important. There's like I said, 5 generations in the workforce. We should probably have people that can speak and represent them in a really authentic way. Gender,
absolutely,
as we all know, the big fight is California sort of kicked things off. And women on boards has become something that we've got so much data to prove that the boards and the companies improve.
I had someone ask me once about that and say, well, I've never seen any, we talk a lot about the fact that if you have diverse executive teams and diverse boards, but is there actually any data? And I literally sent this person an email with like 9, just 9, the ones I could find in that like half hour.
In the first, I was going to say, the first page of the Google search.
But do more and you'll find it.
Yeah.
Well, the other one that really resonated with me too was the first one, which is focusing on the short term versus the long term, because this is an issue. It almost doesn't matter what vector, if it's purpose, if it's brand, if it's customer loyalty, customer experience, there's such this desire to shortcut everything. And I don't know if that's because we're not lifers anymore in our jobs, that we just think about like the next 2 or 3 years that we're going to be in this role. and then it's somebody else's problem. I don't know where that comes from, but how can you get an organization to think about purpose longer term, even if those players might not be around?
I have empathy, first of all, because
Exactly.
short term, those quarterly earnings calls, they're no joke.
They're
And
no fun.
what
Yeah.
people get put through is
Mm-hmm.
really difficult. So I have a lot of empathy because you can't abandon the short term wins,
No.
but you can recontextualize them. You can look at those wins as stepping stones towards your long term goals.
Mm-hmm.
You can reframe the conversation to be looking at value creation. And once you really set that as the epicenter, the conversation begins to change. The problem is you have a lot of demands coming in. And if you aren't able to have alignment on your leadership team and at the board level, you don't have the armor to be able to say, we're not putting all of our time, energy, and effort into those short term goals. Those short term goals are going to ladder up to our long term goals. It takes a lot of humility, it takes a lot of strength, it takes a lot of action and support to get to that place. But the companies that do,
Mm-hmm.
they'll be around for a very, very long time. So I think it's really important that we start reframing that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And the good news is if we look at our investors, our employees, and our customers, they're looking for a lot more in terms of value alignment, values alignment, and having the value ladder up to creating value.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a
Mm-hmm.
good time to have those conversations, but you've got to have people that are supporting you. You've got to have, like I said, the leadership team has to have the board of directors agreeing on all of this, and you've got to have those concentric rings of support to be able to make that transition. Once you do, you can see it. You can see the Unilevers, you can see the IKEAs, you can see all these organizations that are able to do it and do it successfully and are still incredibly financially viable.
I love that. And, to stress your point about how important it is the tenor that the board sets, because I've been a part of many startups in the merry-go-round of Silicon Valley, and the first bust in 1999 and then recent recessions. And if that board is the one that's just focused on the short-term pressure, that's where it's all coming from. It's from them. It's not necessarily that the leaders wouldn't like to do things differently.
Right.
It's they're doing those quarterly reports every year, every quarter, and they're the ones that have to take the heat.
Right.
And so but if you have a supportive board that has a longer term vision and is willing to be a little bit more risk tolerant,
yep,
then what I hear you saying is that it's worth it in the end.
It's worth it. Absolutely. And I understand Patagonia is not a publicly traded company, but they just set the bar for this new expectation. I mean, Mother Earth is their only stakeholder now. And I think all of us that read the news were just like, wow. Just when you think
I need to go buy some Patagonia clothing right now.
Right? Yeah. Just when you think they can't set the bar any higher.
I know.
There you have it. And it was incredible to see. And it was incredible to see the reaction, because people kind of felt like we had hit some sort of ceiling. And all of a sudden they just blew it clean out of the box. And people were like, okay, we have a lot more to do and a further way to go. And it sort of energized and excited people. Right. So it was wonderful to see, once again, our champions went out there and just blew apart these conceptions of how it had to be.
Yes.
And set a whole new standard for what could be.
Right. And I love that, these companies come from positions of strength. REI just did something recently where they said healthcare for everybody, regardless of whether you're a part-time employee or a full-time employee. All these little actions. The thing that frustrates me, and it might frustrate you too, is when I see all these other leaders lauding these actions, but then being unwilling to take them in their own organization. Like they have all those management books on their bookshelf and those leadership books on their bookshelf. But yet when it comes to their day-to-day and how they're leading their companies, it's like they forget that those lessons are there.
System. It's this kind of deep held, and I think antiquated belief that if you want to have a successful business, these are the metrics we have to hit and be measuring. And the truth is, it no longer holds true. Society changed. All of our key stakeholders changed, and we're now accountable. brands, and one of the things that I love, brands used to be singularly created in a funnel, one-way communication. The company was totally in control. They would push it out. Brands are co-created now, and there's
Mhm.
nothing you can do about it. And the company itself has very little control of their own brand. They
Right.
pray they can hold on to bits and pieces of it. But
Right.
the truth is, it's being co-created across that entire stakeholder ecosystem
Yeah.
at lightning speed with technology, what it is today, and levels of transparency, what they are. The consequences have never been higher.
Well, and
So
I always love to tell my clients that very lesson, but also say, so all you can do is intentionally take the actions you can take to make that a narrative you want. And so you don't have to throw your hands up and be like, well, it's whatever people want to say we are. No, it's going to be all what they say it is, and how they perceive it is going to be based on all the actions, big and small, that you take. So isn't it in your best interest to do the best intention, have the best intentionality about those actions, so that you're in sync with those customers? And again, hope and pray that their perception of the brand is what you actually wanted them to have,
well,
and
I
what you genuinely
also,
are.
yes, 100% we're in
Yeah.
alignment. But I also describe it as putting deposits of goodwill and credibility in the bank. It's
Mm-hmm.
not if a disaster happens, it's
It's
when.
when.
It's going to happen. The transparency is so high now due to all the technology we have. The
Mm-hmm.
fact that every person is a citizen journalist. I mean, we just have employees striking now and boycotting. I mean, we have so much happening now. It's when.
Yeah.
So if you're making those deposits along the way, the
Mm-hmm.
chances of those stakeholder groups forgiving you, giving you the benefit
Yes.
of the doubt, believing that there was no malintent if there wasn't any.
Right. And that's an
Disclaimer.
yeah, exactly. Asterisk.
Yeah,
But also understanding that that's an outlier, not the norm. That's when you
exactly.
get that and
You've
when
got
you
a
look,
track record.
yes, exactly. And it's just like you said, it's deposits in the bank. And it's when you consistently underdeliver and let people down that's the problem. But if you can build up that goodwill
Yes.
enough, and by the way, circling back around, that's where being committed to your purpose helps people say, well, this is my community. I
Purpose,
understand that this is,
trust,
yeah.
empathy, all
Yes.
those beautiful things that work together harmoniously to create this greater whole. They all have to be firing and they all have to be utilized constantly. It's not a one and done. You don't do something truthful once and that's it. You
Right.
abandon it. You have
Right.
to do this daily. It has to be part of the fabric of who you are as an organization. It has to be part of the culture. It has to be a part of everything you do. But when you
Mm-hmm.
do it and you do it well,
Right.
it's amazing how much strength it provides when you need it most.
Right. I mean, I wrote about the empathy veneer in my book, which is we're empathetic because we give to the food bank once a year at the holidays,
Yes.
right? So I also sense from what you've said today, there can be a purpose veneer unless you
Oh,
are actually walking your talk and embedding this. I call it operationalizing empathy, but operationalizing purpose,
absolutely.
not just as we talked about the pretty poster on the wall, but what are you doing with hiring? What are you doing with rewards? What are you doing with performance evaluations? What are you doing with culture? It has to be at every level of the
It
organization.
has to be embedded across the entire organization. And I always suggest to people do as much as you can internally before you push it out externally.
Yes.
Hold on to it. It's your baby.
Yes.
Like nurture it, grow it. Make sure every level of the organization understands how to see themselves and how to participate in the purpose before you feel like shouting it from the rooftops.
Right.
It's
That's how you
better
make
to
it genuine.
That's it. And it's better to have difficult conversations internally with friends than it is with the markets that's a little upset with you.
Exactly. Well, this has been such good stuff, Denise. Thank you so much. How, like I mentioned, we're going to have your links in the show notes, but where can people find out more about you or more about the work that you're doing with
LinkedIn
TBWA?
is always a great place. It's where I keep most of my current articles, and you can find me pretty easily. So that's always a fantastic place to connect. I love meeting new people. I think that's how we met the very first time.
Yes.
So it's just a wonderful opportunity to get to say hello, to get to figure out other people's interests, to get to learn more about each other. So
Mhm.
I welcome the LinkedIn connections.
Awesome. All right, folks, you heard it here. Connect with Denise. Write her a note first to tell her that you heard her on the podcast so she doesn't think you're trying to sell her something. And I really enjoyed talking with you. I could have talked about this for another hour. So
I think I could as well. Thank you, Maria. This has been fantastic. And hopefully we'll get to do it again.
Yes. And thank you everyone for listening to another episode of the Empathy Edge podcast. As always, if you liked what you heard, please share it with your friends and colleagues, and don't forget to rate and review. And until next time and our next insightful guest, please remember that cash flow, creativity, and compassion are not mutually exclusive. Take care and be kind.